Alright, Rational Farid here, and let me tell you, what I'm about to drop on you, it's going to hit different. For your entire life, probably, you've been fed this narrative that the Bible, especially those Gospels, are like this perfect, divine, completely flawless instruction manual from on high. Every word, every story, absolutely synchronized, divinely inspired, without a single hiccup. Sounds comforting, right? Well, what if I told you that idea isn't just a little bit off, it's a monumental fantasy? What if the very foundations of the Christian narrative, the stories of Jesus' life, his teachings, his very existence, are actually a chaotic jumble of conflicting accounts? I'm talking about contradictions so blatant, so utterly irreconcilable, that trying to believe them all at once requires a level of mental gymnastics that would make an Olympic gold medalist blush. It's not just a few minor typos we're talking about here, folks. We're about to expose how the Gospels literally collide with each other, telling wildly different tales about the most pivotal moments. And trust me, once you see how much internal literary chaos is hiding in plain sight, you'll never look at that holy book the same way again. Stay tuned, because this is going to be an eye-opener you absolutely cannot miss. Let's tear down the first pillar of faith, shall we? The grand origin story, the birthplace of Jesus. You've got Matthew and Luke, the only two Gospels even bothering with a nativity story. And oh boy, do they collide. Both desperately try to shoehorn Jesus' birth into Bethlehem. Why Bethlehem? Because shockingly, there's a prophecy from Micah that says the ruler of Israel will come from there. But here's the kicker. Jesus is consistently known as Jesus the Nazarene. You'd think that means he's from Nazareth, right? Well, brace yourselves. Some genuinely uncomfortable scholarship, like Renee Salm's groundbreaking work in The Myth of Nazareth, suggests there's next to no definitive archaeological evidence that Nazareth even existed as an inhabited town during Jesus' supposed lifetime. So Nazarene likely referred to a pre-Christian sect or a designation, not a geographical origin. The very premise of their birthplace narrative is built on quicksand, people. Now, how do these gospel writers manage to get Jesus to Bethlehem despite this little geographical inconvenience? Let's look at Matthew. His story has Mary and Joseph living in Bethlehem. Then, because Herod is suddenly obsessed with killing baby Jesus, an angel pops up and tells them to flee to Egypt. Super convenient, right? And after Herod finally kicks the bucket, another angelic intervention tells them to return, but redirects them to Nazareth. It's almost like a scriptwriter desperately trying to connect plot points that simply refuse to connect naturally. The celestial GPS is apparently a bit finicky when you're making it up as you go. But wait, because Luke has a completely different story. Mary and Joseph are chilling in Nazareth when they're suddenly forced to travel to Bethlehem for a Roman taxation census. A Roman taxation census in Judea, which was technically independent at the time, where everyone has to register where their ancestors lived, not where they actually live. And here's the absolute clicher. This supposed Quirinius census, the one Luke cites, historically occurred in 6 CE. Do the math, folks. That would make Jesus 10 years old according to Matthew's timeline. This isn't just an innocent error. This is a full-blown fictional masterpiece, meticulously designed to fit a narrative, not reflect a shred of historical reality. When you peel back the layers, it becomes painfully clear. Both evangelists were simply making it up as they went along, constructing literature, not history, to serve their own theological agendas. They weren't chronicling events, they were crafting mythology. And that, my rational friends, it's a biography bombshell that shatters the myth of biblical infallibility from the very first breath. And the hits keep coming, my friends. If you thought the birth story was a mess, just wait until we dive into the very character and teachings of Jesus himself. Because apparently, even the Son of God couldn't stick to a consistent message across 4 different ghostwriters. Let's start with Matthew, shall we? Remember that Micah prophecy about Bethlehem? Matthew, in his zeal to make Jesus fit the bill, doesn't just quote it. He flat out rewrites it. Micah calls Bethlehem little among the clans of Judah. Matthew, he boldly twists it to say Bethlehem is by no means least. This isn't an oversight or a happy coincidence. This is a deliberate theological edit. So much for divine dictation, eh? This isn't divine truth. It's ancient fan fiction, where the author takes liberties to make the story work for his audience. Then we have the utterly baffling contradiction between Jesus' alleged miraculous conception, the virgin birth, and his meticulously detailed genealogies. Both Matthew and Luke go to great lengths to trace Jesus' lineage through Joseph back to King David. But if Joseph isn't the biological father, what is the point? Are we genuinely expected to believe God's grand plan for a Davidic Messiah relied on Joseph adopting Jesus into the royal line through a legal loophole? It's pure apologetic gymnastics, folks, designed to desperately connect dots that refuse to connect naturally. Some scholars, like Jane Shaberg, have even argued that the virgin conception itself might be a later interpolation or a misunderstanding, making the entire narrative a complete theological and historical tangled mess. Or consider a topic as fundamental as divorce. Mark and Luke's Jesus is an absolute, unequivocal no-divorce command. Simple, clear. But Matthew's Jesus, ever the pragmatist, adds a sneaky little clause, except for porneia. Now, porneia is a wonderfully vague word. It could mean prostitution, illicit marriage, pretty much anything that gave Matthew's community some wiggle room. This isn't divine consistency. It's an author adapting doctrine to fit social realities, just like any human writer scrambling to maintain relevance. It's theological damage control, plain and simple. And for those who love to preach Jesus' loving messages, how about Luke 14:26? Where Jesus demands you literally hate your father, mother, wife, and children. No, it's not a typo. The Greek word here, miseo, means despise or disdain. It implies prioritizing Jesus above all else, even your own family. A beautiful family value if you're building a cult, maybe. But if you're looking for a consistent, benevolent deity, this is just one more glaring issue in the Gospels that fundamentalists conveniently gloss over, pretending it's just hyperbole with utterly radical. Finally, let's talk about the grand failure, the whole end times delusion. Early Christians were absolutely convinced Jesus was coming back any minute now. They sold their possessions, waited with bated breath. But when he was a resounding no-show, later gospel writers, especially Luke, had to scramble. They desperately rationalized the delay, adding new sayings of Jesus that conveniently accounted for his absence, pushing the goalposts further down the field. Sound familiar? It's the exact same pathetic cognitive dissonance we've seen in every failed apocalyptic prophecy since, from the Millerites to Jehovah's Witnesses. The foundational blunder of Christianity, still being explained away after 2 millennia. This isn't prophetic insight. It's human disappointment rewritten as divine plan. Beyond the birth, beyond the conflicting commandments, the inconsistencies absolutely plague the very miracles themselves. You've got Mark's Jesus, in one breath, flat out refusing to give a sign from heaven, basically saying, nope, no magic show for you. And then, in literally every other gospel, you've got endless stories of him curing everything from leprosy to bad breath. Pick a lane, Jesus. Pick a lane. The divine doesn't contradict itself, but a patchwork of human writings trying to outcompete each other certainly does. And don't even get me started on the Beelzebul controversy, where critics imply he's using demonic power to cast out demons. The Gospels try to spin it, but some scholars suggest early versions, based on the underlying Q source, might even lean into the idea that Jesus did use such methods. It's a classic case of damage control, trying to make the divine look less shady. But the grand finale, the pièce de résistance of biblical contradiction, has to be the resurrection narratives. This is the cornerstone of Christian belief, right? And yet, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, each one a unique, wildly conflicting version of the most important event in Christian theology. Who went to the tomb? When did they go? What did they see? A young man? Two angels? Jesus himself, popping up in different places at different times to different people, wearing different outfits? Apologists twist themselves into logical pretzels trying to harmonize these accounts, bending over backwards to make them fit. But the truth is, these aren't apparent discrepancies. They are glaring, fundamental clashes. They are clues screaming at you that these texts are of a fictive character. They are not flies in the ointment. They are crucial evidence for understanding the Gospels as the products of competent and creative writers, not infallible divine dictation. It's the ultimate deception, sold as the ultimate truth. So, what have we learned from this dive into the biblical abyss? The Gospels aren't some perfectly synchronized, divinely inspired record of events handed down flawless from on high. They are, as Robert M. Price so eloquently demonstrates in his work, a collection of human-authored, human-edited narratives, each one with its own agenda, often in direct, undeniable conflict with the others. These contradictions aren't flaws, folks. They're features, telling us a story about the messy, evolving birth of early Christian beliefs, not about a perfectly consistent divine revelation. This isn't about disrespecting the Bible. It's about respecting truth and intellectual honesty. It's about ditching the childish way of reading it, that literal, unquestioning acceptance, and instead finding unsuspected depths and dimensions in it. The Bible is a fascinating artifact of human history, culture, and evolving mythology, and that's far more compelling than a textbook that claims to be infallible but constantly trips over its own feet. If this peek behind the biblical curtain got your gears turning, smash that like button, share this video far and wide, and tell me in the comments, what other biblical contradictions keep you up at night? And if you haven't already, join the Rational Farid by subscribing. Let's keep challenging dogma and embracing reason, one inconvenient truth at a time.